Takes place at a time where the global economy, international trade governance, and more broadly, international economic governance is in a state of flux. Klaus Schade has referred to a number of extremely important developments recently that are providing food for thought not only for us here as we look at our regional integration agenda, but also for us as we look at our engagement in a changing global economy, where we look also at multilateral trade and economic governance regimes and foundations very critically. But we're also having this conversation at a time where introspection about Africa's own regional integration project is extremely important. Klaus has given us a very good overview of a range of regional integration initiatives. And as he mentioned, we don't lack ambition. We don't lack interest in regional integration. But it is useful from time to time to stop, to take stock, to assess whether in fact our regional integration endeavors, our initiatives, the agreements that we are negotiating reflect the fundamental challenges, opportunities, and whether indeed they are addressing our fundamental development concerns. Klaus has mentioned that Namibia's development plan, development strategies, contain reference to regional integration. This is in fact true of most African countries. So regional integration has been one of the pillars of our development strategies for decades. The question is, can we see the development impact of our regional integration endeavors? It's also important to remind ourselves that regional integration is not only about government-led initiatives. These are extremely important, but it's not only about the agreements we conclude, bilateral, regional, and some of the mega regional integration projects that we've undertaken in recent years. Regional integration is much more. It's also about you and me and our role in this process of integrating our continent. If I may just ask our support team, I think they have something which will allow me to move from one slide to the next. Apologies for that. Thank you so much. What I would like to do is ask you to join me to take a big step back, to take a look at some of the foundations of the building blocks of regional integration. And together, let's ask some of the basic questions around regional integration. And I'm asking us to do that because Klaus has asked me to talk about where regional integration is going, quo vadis regional integration. But he's also asked me to say something about competitiveness, about services, and about the youth. And I'd like to start for us to look at the African continent, and on the right-hand side we have Namibia. And it's extremely important that we recognize that the African continent is fragmented. Klaus mentioned the continental free trade area, the negotiations that have recently begun and we hope to conclude fairly soon. 55 member states of the African Union will be negotiating a continental free trade area. Some of those countries are extremely small. Some are landlocked or land-linked. Some don't have much in the way of natural resource endowments. Others do. But there are some important fault lines of the African continent that we do have to keep in mind. And I'd like to link the discussion to the issue of the future of the African continent, Africa's youth. The African continent is a very youthful continent. Namibia's population is also a youthful one. In Namibia, the median age is 21. It's a little bit younger than many of us here. This holds enormous promise. But we need to make sure that that promise, that potential, is realized. And regional integration can be part of that plan, that strategy, to achieve the enormous potential of the African continent. But taking that big step back, let's come back to some basics and ask the question, what is regional integration? And if we had to go around the room, we would find some different, some similar definitions. In some sense, regional integration is the outcome of decisions by investors, entrepreneurs, producers, traders, workers, consumers, you and me, to engage in economic activity that transcends national borders, or that has a cross-border dimension. It's these decisions which actually result in the integration of markets and economies across these national geopolitical borders. Why do we take these decisions? And I think this is extremely important to keep in mind. If we put ourselves in the shoes of an investor, an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, in the shoes of a producer or a trader, in many instances, the opportunities that these economic agents will perceive may well extend way beyond the confines of their national country. The question then is, how can we ensure that these opportunities are accessible, that they can bring the efficiency and the productivity gains, the competitiveness gains, that are actually the foundation of development outcomes. Competitiveness is sometimes seen as a neoliberal concept or construct. Discussions about competitiveness are sometimes put in this realm of economic theory and paradigms. But competitiveness is actually the flip side of development. A competitive firm is a firm that does well in terms of productivity, in terms of innovation, in terms of its bottom line. It is a firm that will grow, will expand, take advantage of new opportunities. Such a firm is the partner of government to achieve the development outcomes that we seek so badly on our continent. Because such a firm helps to address the challenges of unemployment, of poverty, fundamental markers of the development challenges that we face on our continent. Another very important focus area when we're introspecting, when we're thinking about our regional integration agenda and where it will go and where it can go, where it should go, relates, of course, to economic growth. Economic growth on its own is not exactly the same as development. But when we talk about economic growth, it is the quality of growth that matters. The quality of growth. Currently, in our economic policy discourse, we talk about inclusive growth. And inclusive growth has become an important policy priority across the continent, across the globe. But what is inclusive growth? And I've taken just one definition because, again, there are many we could have a look at. And this comes from the OECD. And it says inclusive growth is economic growth that creates opportunity for all segments of the population and distributes the dividends of increased prosperity, both in monetary and non-monetary terms, fairly across society. I've highlighted a number of words in that definition. The first one is about opportunity, access to opportunity. This is fundamental to Africa's integration agenda. Access to opportunity, which may transcend national geopolitical borders. But there is also strong emphasis on the distributional aspects of growth. In other words, who wins? Who loses in the economic process? This matters. And it's particularly important when we take a look at the success or otherwise of our regional integration endeavors to focus on distributional aspects. Who wins and who loses? Because in some cases it may well be that the large economies are the first round winners in the game of regional integration. But smaller countries also have distinct opportunities, provided that the regional integration agenda addresses the particular challenges associated with small size, for example, with isolation, with connectivity, with connections to opportunities. This poses very important challenges to the community of economists, and we have a number of students in our midst today. Because assessing the success of our integration project, when we take a look at the quality of economic growth, the quality of development outcomes, means that we can not only have a look at the broad aggregates. Has GDP increased? What is the per capita GDP of our country? Because these broad aggregates and the averages mask enormous distribution and inequality. And it's that that we are challenged to address if we are concerned about regional integration and its connection to development outcomes. I've also noted the role of investment. The UNTAD investment report was released fairly recently. Quantity of investment does matter, but far more important from a development perspective is the quality of investment. What kind of jobs will be created? For whom? Where will the jobs be created? Are they sustainable income-generating opportunities? Is this long-term anchored investment? Or is it footloose and volatile investment? And we have to keep in mind that increasingly in the global economy in recent decades, investment, even investment in core manufacturing activities, has become much more footloose and volatile. These are the building blocks of development outcomes, and we need to ask what they mean for our regional integration project. Let's pause a moment to take a look at what I've called here the government-led integration initiatives. And Klaus has reminded us of the range of initiatives that exist on the continent. SACU, the oldest customs union in the world, it predates the theory of regional integration of Jacob Weiner in 1950. The SADC integration project, which has changed from a cooperation project to an integration project. The Tripartite free trade area, and of course most recently, our initiative to integrate the entire continent. These are ambitious, these are forward-looking, and these are led by the member states, by the governments of the member states on the African continent. But again, let's ask a fundamental question. What are these initiatives actually? And they are protocols, and they are agreements and annexes to agreements. But let's strip away all of that and say, what is it all about? And fundamentally, it's about measures, policies, regulatory initiatives that are intended to facilitate rather than hinder cross-border economic decisions and activities. But I'd like to just remind us again that such government-led initiatives are not confined only to the regional integration projects that we undertake collectively, the agreements we sign and implement, but they come back to what our governments do at home, what our governments are doing in terms of policy, in terms of measures, initiatives, unilaterally. There are no barriers, there are no restraints on any government taking the initiative to improve its customs and border management operations, to enhance the quality, the systems, the processes of interagency cooperation at its own borders. How does the Revenue Authority work with the Standards Authority, with the Immigration Department, with the police, and the many other agencies that are present to manage our borders effectively? That does not need a regional integration agreement or initiative. That can be done at home. Namibia has a strategy, as we've heard this morning, to become a logistics hub. I think this is a significant opportunity to integrate, to take advantage of opportunities in the surrounding sub-region. Much of what needs to be done in terms of leveraging that logistics initiative for regional integration will be done in Namibia. Policy, regulatory reform, building capacity, looking at interagency cooperation, and many, many other initiatives. So regional integration, while it is also our collective government-led project, it is also a project which each member state needs to embed effectively in its national policies, regulations, the way it does business. But let's move now from this discussion about the foundations of what is a very complex conversation about regional integration to say a little bit more specifically about where do we see regional integration on the African continent going. And I'd like very briefly to have a look, to pause at the tripartite free trade area that Klaus mentioned in his opening remarks. The tripartite free trade area was arguably Africa's first mega-regional integration initiative, an attempt to integrate the economies of 26 member states in East and Southern Africa, from Cape to Cairo, literally. That region cuts across many, many, many regional integration initiatives. SACU, although SACU is very seldom mentioned explicitly when we talk about the tripartite free trade area, it's usually said to be the SADC EAC COMESA integration platform. They certainly are part of that, but there are others. IGAD, but there are also bilateral initiatives for integration that are taking place within this very large part of the African continent. But let's just track what has happened in our attempt to integrate this part of the African continent. History goes back quite a long time in terms of cooperation between the regional economic communities, formal, some formalized, some project or program based. But perhaps the landmark decision that we see in the record is October 2008, when the heads of state and government of these 26 member states decided to establish a tripartite free trade area. If we look at the press releases and the communiques from that event, this was something that we were really excited about. And one of the specific objectives of this tripartite free trade area was to resolve the problem of overlapping membership of regional economic communities. This was truly a landmark objective in a landmark initiative, because it would have meant that a single regime in terms of rules and regulations would have governed trade, investment, trade and services among these 26 member states. What happened since then? The negotiations were scheduled in 2 phases. The first phase focusing predominantly on trade in goods, but there was also focus on the movement of business persons. But it was quite difficult to know exactly who a business person was. second phase would be focusing on trade and services, investment, competition policy. It looked like an integrated integration agenda. But then the negotiations began, and a decision was made by the member states that actually redirected this project away from its initial objectives. In particular, it meant that the problem of overlapping membership would not be resolved. Because the decision was that only those member states that were not party to a free trade area together would be negotiating a liberalization of import duties or tariffs. This meant that the SADC trade in goods regime would continue as before, EAC and COMESA as well. And it means, for example, that the member states that would be negotiating with one another, bilateral negotiations, included the grouping of SACU countries. After all, they have common external tariff, a common policy on trade and tariff-related issues in particular. Those member states would be negotiating with the East African community, but not with Tanzania, because Tanzania already belongs to SADC. So we would continue to trade as the SADC member states with SADC, under SADC rules with Tanzania. The SACU member states would also negotiate with Egypt. Now, it is at this stage extremely difficult to get an update on how these tariff negotiations are going. Who else is actually negotiating with one another? And are we likely to soon see a conclusion to those tariff negotiations? Why am I emphasizing the tariff negotiations? And just as an aside, if we've looked at the media recently, last week a round of negotiations took place in Kampala. And there's some very positive news coming out there to say that negotiations on dispute settlement have been concluded, on trade remedies have been concluded. But I haven't seen anything on the tariff negotiations. But why are the tariff negotiations so important in this discussion? And they're so important the rules of origin negotiations, also not concluded yet, work together with the tariff negotiations. It's only if we have compliance with the rules of origin that exporters can get access to the lower tariff rates. Trade remedies, anti-dumping, countervailing, and also, of course, if we add in safeguards, which have nothing to do with unfair trade, but are really to deal with an increase in imports when trade is liberalized, all of those rules and dispensations and measures only apply to the tariff regime negotiated in the Tripartite Free Trade Area. If two countries in SADC have an issue around dumping, for example, what would be the applicable law? SADC law. So the Tripartite Free Trade Area has gone from being a very ambitious project for 26 member states to a very different, a very scaled down project. What do we learn about this? And I'm going to go quite quickly because I'm sure I'm running out of time. Some of the important lessons that we can take from the tripartite FTA negotiations. Firstly, and this is a very, very important issue, is that policy space also referred to sometimes as concerns about sovereignty, feature very, very prominently in our regional integration agenda. Countries want the policy space to take measures to protect domestic industry, to protect the domestic economy. Regional integration agreements reduces that policy space. And this means that some member states are reluctant to take on significant commitments in terms of tariff liberalization, for example, or in other areas of regulatory reform, for example. But the tripartite FTA negotiations indicates unequivocally that tariff and tariff-related matters are very, very sensitive. By contrast, the 26 member states have been able to agree on a range of other issues around practical integration matters such as trade facilitation, even on standards issues, and many, many other issues. Now, herein lies a very important lesson for us. When we're looking at our regional integration agenda, experience suggests very strongly that we should be looking at a practical integration agenda, the practical challenges that traders may face at borders. For example, the trade facilitation issues, which also very important in the multilateral trade agenda with the World Trade Organization trade facilitation agreement. But extremely important also, and this we haven't reached yet in the tripartite free trade area, is what some economists call a new generation trade agenda: services, investment, competition policy. And this is really where, when we take a look at a 21st century economy and society, the role of services, just as a small example, becomes particularly important. In a country like Namibia, the services sectors account for approximately 65% of GDP. In South Africa, it's higher, closer to 70%. It means the contribution of services to economic activity, to employment, makes this a fundamental issue for us to focus on in our regional integration agenda too. Services also fundamentally related to issues of competitiveness and inclusivity, access to opportunities. It is not possible anymore to be competitive in the production of agricultural products, industrial products, or in fact a range of services without competitive services inputs. In particular, the so-called infrastructure services, transport, communication, energy, are foundations across all economic activities. But they are also drivers and markers of development outcomes. Access to healthcare, to education. These are foundations for the future of the African economy. They are also foundations for the important focus of leveraging Africa's youth dividend. Skip through those. It means that if we are to leverage this important dividend that we have in our young people, we have to think differently about what we do at a national level, but also what we put on our regional integration agenda. And I'd like to perhaps just highlight one area of the international trade and service agenda and focus on a collection of services and related issues, the information and communication technology cluster, if you like. ICT has become as important as energy infrastructure or transport infrastructure in a modern 21st century economy. It's about facilitating connections across sectors and activities of the economy and the continent. It means fundamentally that when we take a look at what regional integration can do for our youth, we need to be thinking about access to those opportunities for inclusive growth, those access to economic opportunities that transcend national geopolitical borders. It means fundamentally that digital literacy has become absolutely essential. It means that movement of persons across borders becomes absolutely essential. Our youth needs a regional integration agenda that provides access to opportunities, but also that facilitates the development of skills, of capacities, which can be the key to those opportunities. So as we used to say many, many years ago, numeracy and literacy really, really are important. So reading, writing, maths or arithmetic really, really are important. There's a fourth literacy, and that is digital literacy. And digital literacy needs to be addressed at the national level, but also at our regional integration level in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of regulatory harmonization and cooperation, but also facilitating access to opportunities that comes with movement across borders, unencumbered movement across borders. So where is Africa's integration project at this stage? The continental free trade area provides a distinct opportunity for us to be innovative in terms of the regional integration agenda. But my final point is that these integration initiatives that we undertake collectively have to subscribe to the principles of rules-based governance. Transparency, accountability, predictability, and contestability, so that we can resolve disputes that may arise. Good governance is fundamentally the foundation for development outcomes at national, but also at a regional and continental level. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Prince Junius, and I just would like to ask two questions. The first question is just clarification. As I know that tripartite means three parties involvement, I just would like to know in the TFTA, are we saying that it is three members that ratified to the trade agreement, or what spectrum of trade is meant here? This goes to Ms. Judy. And the second question is that it's going to Mr. Carl Shilton, that, and it's read as follows. What is the position of Namibian economic? Is it worrisome? And if it is, what is the time frame of its recovery? Or perhaps Namibia is likely to become Zimbabwe one day? Yeah, ask that because we are a little bit worried as youth. We are worrying to whether our investment in education is still fruitful or Yeah.
Although the tripartite FTA is often said to be the EAC, SADC, COMESA initiative, one has to keep in mind that it will be the member states who are signing that agreement. So SADC, EAC, and COMESA are not parties to the agreement. It's an agreement among the 26 member states. So we've just heard in the news, as Klaus reminded us this morning, that South Africa signed the agreement last week in Kampala. So ultimately, it's an agreement about the member states undertaking commitments, which they have negotiated on tariff liberalization and a range of other issues. And of course, keep in mind that there is a phase 2 of negotiations still coming up, which has not, we understand, started in earnest yet. But it's agreement ultimately about the commitments that member states undertake. The next question, I think, is an extremely important one. The ultimate question, who do the unilateral government-led integration initiatives benefit if not implemented within a regional arrangement or across a number of countries? And here I think we need to recognize that there are certain economic development issues which may be best addressed at home in the national context. There are others which require cooperation with neighboring countries or are best addressed collectively. And then, of course, there are other challenges and problems that are best addressed at a multilateral or a global level. And climate change is a very good example of the last category. We really need all member states of the global economy to be addressing climate change issues. So the discussions around the Paris Accord and America withdrawing from that raises certain issues about the success of addressing climate change issues. But there are very definitely issues that will have a regional dimension on regional benefits which can be started at home. The Honourable Minister has referred to industrial development, and this is perhaps absolutely critical. It's become one of the pillars, known as one of the pillars of developmental regional integration. And we have to recognize that industrial development and diversification is really the fundamental challenge, our capacity to produce tradables competitively. That really is the challenge. How some of those issues can be best addressed at home. Developing the capacity, education initiatives, for example, taking a look at policy reforms which are particularly important to leverage national level initiatives. Investors and entrepreneurs are very often anchored at home. But there will be aspects, for example, harmonization of quality standards, food, health, safety standards. There we need cooperation with the neighbors because we need access to their markets. So the standards that we produce our products to need to be acceptable in those export markets. So it really comes back to the nature of the problem that we're trying to address and finding which is the appropriate channel to address it. Is it national? Is it regional? Or is it multilateral or global?